students. I am Mohita Prasad, and today the topic that is going to be discussed is Hellenism. Hellenism. Hellenism in Keats' poetry. Now, what is Hellenism? The word Hellenism is derived from the word Hellen, Hellene, which means Greek. So, Hellenism basically means Greek. It stands for Greek culture, it stands for fine arts, and fine arts means poetry, music, painting, sculpture, architecture, etc., etc., as developed by the Greek cities in the 5th and the 4th century BC. So, everything connected with Greek culture, whether it was the paintings or poetry or music, all was covered under the word Hellenism. And Keats' Hellenism is represented by his different kinds of interest in his poetry. Now, Keats had in his early days studied a lot of Greek classics and sculpture. Although he was an Englishman, he did not know the Greek language and he had no opportunity of reading Greek literature or of knowing anything about Greek customs and ways of life. But still, Keats was very Greek in his temper and in his spirit. Temper, I mean his temperament, his attitude, his spirit. So, he felt himself very close. He was fascinated by the Greek culture. The Greek influence came to him especially when he started reading the translation of Greek classics, especially Lempriere's classical dictionary. Lemprieres. And through this reading, through this translation of Greek classics, Keats was able to study the thoughts that were expressed in it. But more important than these sources was his own tendency, his own nature. And one of his friends lent him a copy of Chapman's translation of Homer. And when he read this translation of Homer, he was attracted by the new world of wonder. And Keats has described this effect in his very famous sonnet on first looking into Chapman's Homer. He was so excited, he was so fascinated, he was so thrilled that he felt as if he had discovered a new planet, something very new and exciting. So, Keats' study of Greek classics and sculpture, his study of Lempriere's classical dictionary, very much acquainted him, familiarized him with the Greek mythology, and he loved every bit of it and used it in his poetry. The stories of Endymion, Lamia, and Hyperion, these are all based on Greek legends. And it is also admitted that the subjects of Ode to Psyche and Ode on a Grecian Urn are Greek. Now, why I am giving you this introduction or this background of Keats's temperament or attitude as being very Greek and Hellenistic is because we have in our syllabus these odes on a Grecian urn and Psyche, and it is very important to know this background, which you could also include in your answer. So, the poet, while expressing his passion for beauty, transports himself in his imagination to the days of ancient Greece. Now, what are some of the Hellenistic features in Keats' poetry? Number one, since he felt very close, since he had read so much of it, he had a Greek instinct, number one. Number two, he had a love for Greek culture and literature. Number three, he loved Greek sculpture and art. Number four, his love for beauty. Number five, his Greek temperament. Number six, his use of myths and legends. Number seven, influence of Homer in his poetry. Number eight, his sad and melancholic attitude. And last but not the least, his romanticism combined with his Greekness. And if I can very briefly talk to you about the Ode to a Grecian Urn, we can just examine the Hellenism that is there in the stanzas of Ode to a Grecian Urn. So, Hellenism, in the very first stanza, Keats shares the Greek literature by addressing urn with the reference to time and silence. And he calls it a bride wedded to the spirit of silence. He personifies the urn like an adopted child, calls it unravished bride of quietness, calls it a sylvan historian, and can thus express a flowery tale which is more sweetly than our rhyme. So, there is a reference to the urn in a number of ways that I just told you. Then, Keats' typical attitude of Greekness is attributed to the human shapes which are given to gods and goddesses. What men or gods are these? So, there are those human figures engraved on the urn, but when Keats looks at them, he interprets them as gods and goddesses. Now, this is the Greekness. He has read so much of the Greek culture and all that the figures he sees them as gods and goddesses. Then his love for Greek art is and beauty is also conveyed through heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. And then we also see his Hellenism, the way he looks at the trees which are surrounding the lovers, and how he feels happy that the tree would never shed its leaves. He is happy for the piper because his songs would be sung forever. So, this is also a Greek temperament that is brought forth in the third stanza of Ode to a Grecian Urn. And then there are various allusions, references to the art, culture, literature with regard to Ode on a Grecian Urn. The pictures which are engraved on the urn show Keats's love for Greek art and its ideals. So, in conclusion, we can say that Keats had a great passion for beauty and truth, and we can clearly see his use of Greek Hellenistic ideas in his poems, which is very praiseworthy. We conclude here.